As hero shooter fans, we're living in a multiverse alternate reality where a Chinese game developer picked up Overwatch 1 and made a true sequel to its core premises and executed so much that Blizzard failed to. Live service competitive multiplayer games are difficult to maintain an audience, and it's typical to expect a boom-bust cycle of releasing new content holds players' attention for a short while, only to be stolen away by the next shiny object that the new free-to-play shooter is releasing. Marvel Rivals has been bucking that trend. And while we don't know the entire truth of the peak player base across all platforms for Marvel Rivals, the Steam charts are a very clear indicator that it is competing at levels that we never thought possible. Surrounding the release of Season 1 that brought in 2 of eventually 4 new characters to the game, the Fantastic Four, as well as a host of really stellar cosmetics and a good battle pass, Marvel Rivals eclipsed even the mighty Counter-Strike 2 in terms of concurrent player numbers on Steam. Now, to be fair, this is a all-time peak of Marvel Rivals and somewhat of a lull, a down point for Counter-Strike, but that's just on Steam. All of Counter-Strike's players are on Steam, whereas Marvel Rivals is also available on consoles. This performance stands at odds from the doubters and the haters who call the game just Overwatch with a Marvel skin on top, as well as the supposed game journalists who critically panned the game, seemingly to want to keep a cozy relationship with Blizzard Entertainment. I want to take an in-depth look at some of the worst reviews for Marvel Rivals and explain for maybe these journalists or any player that's looking to get into the game why those of us, and especially dedicated Overwatch 1 players, like it so much. Marvel Rivals has been nominated for the DICE Online Game of the Year for 2025, and I think it should win it. I do have complaints and criticisms of the game and certainly foresee it looking to make some of the similar mistakes that Overwatch made, which I hope to help prevent. But overall, I have full faith in this franchise's power because the major theme of me going through so many negative reviews about the game is I feel if you don't spend the time to get this game, it won't click with you just how deep, nuanced, and rewarding that it actually is, which is the short answer to reveal why players that play it more want to play it more. We're past the era of games where you have to have immediate pick up and play value. Marvel Rivals stands as a testament that games can be complex. You don't necessarily need to understand every single mechanic immediately, unless of course you're a games journalist that doesn't know anything about the genre or take time to learn the game. While we're all going to have our own unique perspectives on how strong certain things in the game should be, what direction they should take, I'm not a huge fan of the Season 1 balance patch myself, but ultimately none of this matters because the top line thing that will always matter more in these types of games is the fun factor and the hero expression, a thing that has been watered down in Overwatch over years and years of time as they bend over backwards to appease the wrong subset of people. Marvel Rivals is an unabashed, confident game that is unafraid to be itself. Whereas Overwatch over the years struggled with these criticisms because they actually care what games journalists think. Back in the launch era of Overwatch 1, there was a controversy over Tracer's victory pose. I don't know, because some journalists didn't like how she stood and revealed her butt. Now, thankfully, they did actually improve the pose to be more whimsical in nature, still revealing her toned physique. So while in that case they didn't necessarily compromise their artistic vision, you can kind of see that they care about these types of criticisms, whereas NetEase is unabashedly unafraid to turn the sex appeal of every single character of this game up to 11. This, for me, is a very clear visual example. If you look at the art style of Marvel's Avengers video game, which seemingly was looking to try to make the superheroes seem less super, and in comparison, Marvel Rivals nails the hero fantasy in the character art and in their kit representation in-game. The hilarious thing that we're going to now go through with a lot of these journalists that glaze Overwatch while criticize the over-design, let's say, of Marvel Rivals is that Overwatch took so much inspiration from not only all other games, but heroes in general. They're called heroes in Overwatch. It's literally a copy from superheroes of comic book eras, with a lot of the characters being over-the-top attractive, but super in so many other ways. These characters are aimed to be larger than life, something to aspire to be. We all can do that in whatever way we're capable of being that. That's what heroes were always supposed to be. So in some ways, we're coming into contact with a philosophical problem, and Marvel Rivals, whether it's on how they design the game or the characters or the whole philosophy, is kind of bursting that bubble where the convenient myths are coming into contact with reality. Okay, we want to talk about a lot of deeper gameplay reasons as well, but I think the visual aesthetic is a good indicator of their gameplay decisions. Like, once you explain that, it's more easy to explain why every hero is overkitted and how it's over-the-top bombastic, because it's visually telling you that's what it's going to be. And I certainly don't think we should be criticizing a video game for having too much clear, appealing fun factor. Kind of ridiculous, but that's what we're going to read in some of these reviews. Let's take a look at varying degrees of terribly thought out reviews of Marvel Rivals. Starting off with The Guardian, discomfitingly slick hero shooter makes you worry about gaming's future. So here's where the Overwatch comparisons are going to start, and I can't believe how ignorant some of these are. And I say that as a longtime Overwatch fan who loved the game, but I also know the Blizzard model. Let's remember what the Blizzard model was. Blizzard, as a longtime developer, was experts at polish. They called it Blizzard Polish. But it was never called Blizzard Innovation or Blizzard Risk-Taking. That's not what Blizzard did. Blizzard took things like Warhammer or the MMO EverQuest to be an inspiration for World of Warcraft, which improved and polished up a lot of the designs. There was other action RPGs. There was certainly other RTS games. Blizzard specialized in charm and polish, and they always plagiarized everybody. So first of all, any comparisons to plagiarizing Overwatch is ridiculous, and it's going to look progressively more ridiculous as we get into the examples. Let's read what he has to say. Marvel Rivals, the latest live service game from Chinese mega publisher NetEase, is Overwatch with Marvel characters. That's not just the elevator pitch, that's exactly what it is. A colorful roster of comic book characters with differing skills meets in a series of sci-fi arenas to do team-based battle over a small selection of play modes. Machine gun-toting vanilla guy, Punisher, is Overwatch's Soldier 76 with a hint of Bastion. Godlike healer Adam Warlock is the male Mercy, and as fist-thudding tank, Hulk is just rampaging gorilla Winston with less hair. Pause for a moment. All of those designs existed before Overwatch. And while, okay, Punisher transforming into a turret is kind of like Bastion, who has transformation modes, but Punisher also has a very full kit because the entire identity of that character is he has an arsenal of weaponry. And don't you think that Reaper, who also has like infinite shotguns and a trench coat, might have taken some artistic inspiration from other comics or visual art before him? And oh yeah, this comparison to Hulk and Winston I particularly love because of how stupid it is. You see how Winston is an intelligent scientist with glasses, but then builds up his rage to then go into primal rage for him to Hulk smash everything around him. Comparing Hulk to Winston, it's as if you don't know which one came first. Hulk had a TV show since the 70s. So while there is and will be certain specific gameplay mechanics that obviously were taken directly from Overwatch, it would be ridiculous to think Marvel isn't allowed to use its own IP with character premises that they invented that Overwatch clearly took anyway. Gaming site Games Radar has even provided a handy guide to show players which of the Marvel cast members are most analogous to their Overwatch faves. Good lord, man. I love Overwatch, but to make it seem like they invented heroes is just ridiculous. One of the worst examples was from former Blizzard Mike Ybarra, who tried to make the claim that Black Widow is a plagiarism of Widowmaker, a take that was so dumb he has since deleted the tweet. But this is the terrible logic here, guys. Black Widow is a character from Stan Lee from the 60s, a Russian spy from the Soviet Union who defects to the United States. Whereas Widowmaker in Overwatch is the ballerina wife of Gerard LaCroix, who was an Overwatch agent who spearheaded operations against Talon, killed by Widowmaker, who was a brainwashed sleeper agent, and then is a Talon assassin. This is hilariously the inverse of Black Widow, because she defected from the Soviet Union to the United States. Black Widow was also brainwashed by the Soviets and struggled to overcome it working for the United States. And in some cases was one of the first femme fatale characters, which is the entire archetype that Widowmaker is to begin with. So to be clear, iteration on typical archetypes. Not only does it happen in art through time, you can study this going all the way back to the first stories that were ever told. Everything's inspired from something. This happens even more in gaming, of course, where there's direct mechanics that players feel. And if you get emotionally attached to a certain subset of it, like, let's say, Mercy, of course, rezzed everybody on the team. And yes, Adam Warlock does that same thing, but he also does like 5 other things too. So he isn't just a male version of Mercy, like he says here in The Guardian. He does have one ability that is the same, but other heroes in MOBA games did that as well. It's not like Rez is a new concept. The full team Rez was taken from Dota anyway. So it isn't even original. Just because it's original in the Overwatch game, you have to bias towards whichever game you want to have this kind of perspective, and it's just divorced from reality. Because that's not even a mechanic they made. Okay, quick edit. I had to fact check myself on this. It's actually a very important detail. Omni Knight from the Dota 1 mod, which was built in Warcraft 3, an important detail because Dota is an entire game, and Blizzard losing the MOBA genre is one of their biggest regrets in the history of the company, because they were too busy making money off of World of Warcraft to see and capitalize on the next big thing, which spun off to make Dota 2, League of Legends, and other games like it. I'm such an OG that I remember when Omni Knight had a full team res. I can't actually find visuals of this because apparently it got patched out at some point, even way back then. But the animation of angels over the corpses of your teammates as you instantly res them was the same exact thing as Mercy in Overwatch 1. You just have to take my word for it. And it makes me really wonder if these game journalists just want to be on Blizzard's good side, because how dumb of these takes do you have to be? It's ridiculous. And it's certainly not working because the players are still playing the game. You could try to spread all this misinformation all you want, but it's not working. Here's the ending to the Guardian article. Rivals, like many other highly polished, super focused franchise expansions, is entertaining, gorgeous, and well made. But its existence bodes ill for the mainstream games industry and those who work in it. Right, totally unlike the working conditions for females in the Blizzard offices from the past decade. It says that to be successful, especially in the live service sector where so much investment is going, broadening or challenging a genre isn't necessary. You simply need to replicate and refranchise, tossing a few low denomination coins at the concept of innovation. Meanwhile, studios that strike out with new ideas or original characters are doomed to failure. Millions of dollars lost, jobs gone, game over. It's as if he's crying about Concord right now, which was just a bad game. Like, what other example could he be thinking of? Rivals is crammed with Stan Lee superheroes, but its message about the total and utter Funko Popification of games is as bleak as a Charles Burns graphic novel. What a thoroughly stupid point of view. Here's the thing about logic, guys. You can make logical points that are completely divorced from reality. Like, in theory, the things he's complaining about could matter, but they just aren't true. Marvel Rivals is anything but a hollow reskin of a game. There's a lot of criticisms you can make, and some of the other articles kind of contradict this one, because he makes it seem like it's just Overwatch but Marvel characters. Other articles are going to state that the characters are overkitted and too complex. Like, which one is it, right? The Guardian gives Marvel Rivals 3 stars out of 5. Kind of a strange take that seems political in many ways rather than an actual game review. Well, sir, I give your review a half of star out of 5, as I think you're deliberately misrepresenting history and clearly showing defensive bias and attributing credit to the wrong sources. Blizzard does many things great, but making their own unique IP was never it. So to make it seem like it was, you don't even know the industry you're supposed to be tasked with writing about. All right, get that out of my face. All right, this next one I'm not going to go into depth about because the writer didn't put much effort in it. PC Gamer gave Marvel Rivals 73 out of 100 and seemingly just doesn't like the bombastic hero designs and prefers simplicity, and also had a bad time with team comps that had too many duelists. There isn't a lot of meat on this review, but as far as bad reviews go, I'm actually going to rate this one a 5 out of 5 bad review. It's a 5 out of 5 negative review. I don't agree with the points, but if you're going to criticize Marvel Rivals, do it on reasonable grounds. If you're someone that likes the reliable gameplay of role queue, which Overwatch has, or likes more simplistic hero designs, Overwatch will do that better. Those are reasonable complaints to have. I do think if you put more time into the game, you might get past some of these bugbear problems. And my issue with games journalists is that they often play a multiplayer game, which is intended to be played for thousands of hours for, I don't know, 5 to 10. And then they say a lot of ignorant stuff about it. But those 2 points, PC Gamer has relevant criticism to levy, as average players that get into games that are filled with duelists won't necessarily have the real Marvel Rivals experience, which I would say you almost always want 1, sometimes 2 tanks, and at least 1, if not 2 healers. Sorry, Vanguard, strategist, whatever. But I also think the balance of the game does dictate that multiple duelists on your team isn't really a downside. They're very, very strong. It's not like in Overwatch where 1 tank will block out all of the offensive impact of like half of your team. There's so many duelists that you can pick that while maybe you prefer to have more of a teamwork brawly game, when your team does have a lot of duelists, there is options for you to also pick more duelists and get value out of it. It'll be easier if you have at least 1 support and 1 tank, but I at least personally rarely experience that even when I play quick play, but I'm at the higher end of the MMR spectrum. Not the highest, but people are trying to win in all of my ranked games. And even if they're trying out new heroes in quick play, usually someone tries to at least make the team comp a bit more functional by swapping to something. Maybe that's just me that's doing that on the team. But anyway, a good negative review for real things that actually can matter. Let's try the other end of things now and read some absolute nonsense. One of the lowest reviews, Games Radar, reviewed Marvel Rivals at 2.5 out of 5 stars, which would be a 50% score. Marvel Rivals is so preoccupied with trying to be like Overwatch that it forgets to play to its own strengths. Huh? Really? That's what you think? All right, let's see what he has to say. After several matches in Marvel Rivals, several! This is one of the deepest, complicated multiplayer games you've ever touched, and you played several matches to come to this conclusion. He says, I finally feel comfortable with Captain America's kit. It helped that I started seeing him as a sturdy damage dealer instead of the tank he's technically classified as, and figuring out how to use his throwable shield properly didn't hurt either. I decided to take a risk and use the captain's mobility skill, where he leaps in the air, rushes forward, and crashes down to rush in and claim the control zone before the match timer hits 0. I forget for a moment that I'm not playing Overwatch 2, and Captain America isn't Winston. Instead of tightly controlled movement, I get unpredictable momentum, no say in where Captain America goes, and instant death as he sails in the wrong direction into the entire opposing team. This is a wonderful example because I loved Captain America and also struggled with his controls. His mechanics are not easy, okay? So that there's a heart of this that is almost something that's true, okay? He's almost making a point. There are some unwieldy mechanics, but here's the problem. He is playing the character entirely backwards. You should be using your Captain America abilities to get out, not to get in, because in fact, he's a terrible damage dealing tank. When played the way that I just said, he's one of the most survivable tanks. So he goes into this thinking he's understood and cracked the code of how to play these characters, but he's entirely the opposite of correct. So how could you ever get good data on how to enjoy a game that you are playing entirely wrong? It would be like playing Counter-Strike and complaining that you can't run and shoot like you do in Call of Duty, or playing a MOBA game and wondering why you have to learn item progressions. It's a misread of the game. Is it less intuitive than how easy the skill floor of Overwatch tends to be? Yes. And I do think there's some comparison to be made with Winston in terms of they both having a cleave attack and play to frontline for the team and build their ult. There's some comparisons that are correct to Winston, but he isn't a damage dealing tank either. So it's like he just doesn't really know what he's talking about in this review. He goes on, some characters are also close to one-to-one recreations. Scarlet Witch absorbs energy from foes and launches magic orbs. The same as Moira, while Hawkeye's archery-oriented kit is just like Hanzo's, down to the Wakizashi, am I saying that right? I have no idea, melee attack and double jump. Marvel Rivals even replicates Hanzo's distinctive aiming reticle. The similarities are tacky, but more than that, they're confusing. Other heroes have exceptional kits built around their specific powers, which makes those legally distinct variations of Overwatch characters seem completely out of place. Okay, hold on, just like, let's remember for a second. Hawkeye existed before Hanzo. So he's got to have bow-like mechanics. And by the way, there was a bow in Team Fortress 2, which also functioned quite similar to the way Hanzo does. By the way, does he just not know that? Do I know gaming history better than a guy who's paid to write about it? Why is that the case? To some degree, yes, these two characters are good examples of some of the closest comparison points. But when you start to dig into the lore, which frankly, I was never big into Marvel ever, but loving this game has made me want to just like learn about these characters. And anytime there's something that I'm like, man, that looks like it's kind of copied from Overwatch, there's a really great justification in the long, extensive history of these characters existing for the last 60 years. So yeah, you can pick out certain mechanics that are from Overwatch, but Overwatch did that with every single mechanic they have. Almost none of it is unique, bar maybe the things they took from World of Warcraft, like putting a shield-based character into a shooter game, that's unique, but in general, Cassidy's Peacekeeper functions exactly the same as the Half-Life 2 Magnum. Batiste's 3-round burst rifle is almost entirely the COD 4 M16. Farah's rocket is from Quake. Mercy's beam is literally the medic from Team Fortress 2. So like, what are we even talking about here, guys? They did it first. And now what, another game can't use the Blizzard copy paste but improve it formula? That's not how this works, guys. And why would we want that to be the case? Why should one game company be the one that's allowed to polish up game mechanics, especially when they mismanaged the resources and made a bad product and had to cancel half of the game? Why should they only be the ones allowed to use these mechanics that everybody likes? That's ridiculous. Overwatch players defended Overwatch from the comparison to Team Fortress 2, which frankly, having played all the way back to the classic patch they recently put out, where it was just the original cast of characters, realizing how much different Overwatch became over the years, I'm like, dang, it actually does feel a lot like Team Fortress 2, with just like ultimates added in. Here's some other dumb lines from this guy. The problem is how uneven much of the roster is, and skill balance is all over the place, even without the bugs that keep certain abilities from working correctly. I think they've worked through a bunch of those. This is an older article, keep that in mind. All of these are from like weeks ago, but at the same time, like, it's a live service game. Why should you think you have a definitive understanding in the first week? Anyway, a long-distance acorn from Squirrel Girl deals as much damage as one of Hawkeye's charged headshots, which doesn't seem quite right. Okay, first of all, was this in some version of a patch I didn't know about? This is just can't be true, right? Because Hawkeye was one-shotting things in Season 0, and I think he still can, right? Squirrel Girl 3-shots things. Maybe he means a body shot is the same. And furthermore, Hawkeye is a much better character than Squirrel Girl. What are you even talking about? He's making it seem like Squirrel Girl does too much damage. Meanwhile, she's one of the most middling characters in the entire game. Oddly enough, this is the one you should be comparing to Overwatch because it's entirely Junkrat. Grenade launcher spam-based character with a CC and mobility, also given to maybe the quirkier personality character. That's closer to Overwatch, but even that, it's not like Junkrat is completely unique either. I mean, that gun as well is taken from Quake, or at least maybe Unreal Tournament. He goes on, Jeff the Land Shark and Venom share an almost identical ability where both characters disappear under the stage, emerging under a target opponent to attack. But Jeff, the healer, tucks multiple enemies in his mouth before spitting them away while Venom just pops up and smacks someone. What the hell are you talking about? How is this sentence even logically coherent? They're the same thing, except they're different. So I do think he has a semblance of a point here where there is a lot of similar setups. There is overlap in execution or playstyle in some cases. A lot of damage ults are big AoE explosion in this area or big burst attack, like his Iron Man's ult, way different than the explosion of Magneto's ult. They have different personalities, but like, I don't think we need this game to be built like Blizzard tries to build their game, where they do try to have every ability feel unique. That's a Blizzard philosophy thing, and maybe it's good in some cases, but not every game has to do that. In fact, many other successful games have more ability overlap, where there's commonly shared mechanics so that you can kind of understand the competitive visual design of what's going on. This character goes underground, that character goes underground. We know what's happening in both cases. So yeah, in a way, I guess it's not unique, but it doesn't have to be, because there's a benefit to it where you can have characters with lots of different versions of different things and still understand what the heck's going on. Whereas if you have 30 to eventually, I guess, 50 characters down the line, but they're going to add 2 characters per season at least, we're going to catch up and bypass Overwatch at that rate. You simply can't have everything be entirely unique in its visual representation, because then it's going to be too many different things going on. Way too difficult for a new player to understand what does it mean when Jeff goes underground or Venom goes underground or a new hero also does that. It's easier to pick these things up because the visual language helps ease along how complicated the game is, and it's already super complicated. Keep in mind, the title of his review is so preoccupied with trying to be like Overwatch that it forgets to play to its own strengths. Well, this is a strength that you're forgetting it has, bro, because you want it to be like Overwatch. Make up your mind. Should it be like Overwatch or not? Your own premise of your argument doesn't make sense. It's shocking that any editor allowed him to title it this way. After reading what he wrote, he somehow is capable of judging the game for trying to be too much like Overwatch, but then being mad in every instance that it's different from Overwatch. Make up your mind. It just sounds like you just want to be playing Overwatch, which is fine. Almost no one else wants to. I guess you could go share that opinion with your 10 journalist friends. Jeff, by the way, is the most picked character in casual play, which also debunks the idea that Marvel Rivals is just riding high on the Marvel characters, which certainly helps. It's not a downside, but new characters like Jeff and Luna, who nobody really knew anything about, are quickly becoming fan favorites for those that play the game because they like the gameplay of the game. The article goes on, these are annoying, but some issues are legitimately problematic. Punisher can set up an armored machine gun that's just a little too effective at demolishing everyone in range, which forces teams to switch from the objective to stop the Punisher, repeated when he inevitably uses the skill again. Loki's big thing is creating duplicates to confuse enemies, but they're inactive until the real Loki attacks and never moves. It might confuse AI foes, but human opponents can spot the real one in seconds. Oh, I love this sentence so much. Oh, it's so great. He's patting himself on the back because he can tell which of the Loki clones is not the real one. Hey, that one's moving, guys. I solved the equation of the game. No, you moron. Loki clones aren't supposed to confuse you. You're congratulating yourself for, like, solving the riddle that the Loki that's not moving is the fake one. Imagine how OP it would be if they were all moving. No, it's to give him mobility across the map. It's not to confuse you. Yeah, it kind of adds to the lore that that's what he does as a character, but especially since the different Loki clones drop his most powerful ability, the green totems that turn damage into healing. You're placing the totems in order to move around the map and make that big timing play. It's not to confuse the enemy of which one's the real one. This is just a very comical gameplay misread by you. He's a character with like a super high skill ceiling, and you're criticizing it because you don't get it. Now, Punisher is a bit annoying, I will admit. But alternatively, he also is a way of breaking really sustainable tank lines. So it's like, what do you want? And to the extent that he's similar to Soldier 76 and Bastion, he's simply a better designed version of those characters. I do find him a bit annoying in many instances, especially as I'm trying to play tank. And if I don't have a mag ult to interact with his ultimate, mowing down everything with his ult is kind of over the top, but the whole game is over the top, and he's one of the more easily counterable characters in the game. So yeah, if you just want to like stand on the objective and have nothing happen the whole game, I could see why you think Punisher's really bad for the game and problematic. What did he say? Legitimately problematic. I think you're just bad, honestly. I think you're just bad at the game. Which is okay, but why not spend time learning how to counter him rather than say that the design is legitimately problematic? As if Overwatch players didn't struggle with the Bastion character in Overwatch 1 either. Like, these characters are strong and pub stompers. Oddly enough, Punisher is good at all tiers due to actually how good his design is, in my opinion. That's all we'll look at from this review, otherwise we'll be here for years looking over every dumb word that these journalists write about this game. He gave Marvel Rivals 2.5 stars out of 5, one of the most harsh reviews in terms of scoreline. I will equally give him 2.5 stars out of 5. I think you would have a much better written review if you realized and checked your own biases And rather than set Overwatch as the base template of what a good game is, be open-minded and try to learn the game you're supposed to be reviewing, then you could have empowered some of your more interesting points with actual useful insight rather than just showing you're ignorant and don't really know how the game works. Better luck next time. All right, last one. This is the harshest review I could find. Eurogamer, 40%, 2 stars out of 5. They say NetEase's spin on the hero battler is complex and moreish, but rarely much actual fun. Its biggest impact is a renewed appreciation for the rivals that do it better. Oh my goodness. Where are they, bro? I'd love to play these games. Eurogamer, which games are we talking about? I need to download those because I love Marvel Rivals. I think it's great. Even when I hate the balance patch, I still think it's pretty great. What games could we possibly be discussing that are better than this? Global gaming phenomenon, breaking concurrent player base records. All right, let's see what he has to say. Sometimes you don't quite know what makes something work until you experience another version of it that doesn't. This is, unfortunately, my experience of Marvel Rivals, a team battler that is eminently playable and moreish, but also never quite properly good. In this case, it's a matter of many, many little things holding Marvel Rivals back, as opposed to one major error, the result of a game that's much less a lesson as anything else, that competitive games, perhaps more than any other, are games that live and die by their attention to detail. Okay, so if he's right, Marvel Rivals should be dying, right? If they struggle with attention to detail, and that's the most important thing, the results should show that, right? Okay. He goes on, I should preface all of this by saying I really haven't had a terrible time with Marvel Rivals. It is not a disaster, and despite its very obvious free-to-play trappings, it is still somewhat inoffensive, albeit perhaps the sheer maximalist opacity of its UI too busy getting in the way for me to ever really engage with many of its forms of in-game currency. More on that soon. The problem is it just fails to ever really be particularly enjoyable. I've experienced something while playing Marvel Rivals. Some frustration, some competitive urge, a few fleeting moments of satisfaction, a few more moments of boredom and disappointment. Boredom? I didn't expect that word to show up in any of these reviews. It's bombastic, over the top, and maybe too much. Like, how could it be boring and moreish? Moreish, by the way, it's like it is so satiating. It's like lots of something and you want more of it. How could that ever be boring? He's contradicting himself already. He goes on, but none, when I really think about it, that ever really landed on fun. Marvel Rivals' single biggest issue from the long list of little ones probably is the hardest to explain, but also the most important. It's the lack of strategy, which is really a result of something else. Marvel Rivals is overcomplicated, lacking the clear archetypes, obvious complementary picks, readable environments, and broad character strokes that all combine to give more successful team battlers their special sauce, which is this, a sense of ongoing, organic, ever-changing tactical narrative. Okay, there's way more strategy in this game. How could it be overcomplicated but lack strategy? I just don't understand how that's even physically possible. And he, again, lacking clear archetypes. This is kind of similar to the Overwatch pilled journalists out there, where I think it's true, the characters are overkitted, overcomplicated, in the best possible way. Like, where you actually learn it and you realize how much diversity of gameplay and strategy there actually is. Because if you have a clear archetype of a character, they're kind of only built to do one thing. So they're best in certain clear situations. Whereas the overcomplicated characters and overkitted characters in Marvel Rivals means like you have a lot of gameplay flexibility. Some are kind of one note, but many offer a lot of options. We've already seen this in the other reviews as well, where the players of those certain characters, whether it be Captain America, Loki, or whatever, these journalists, they don't even know what they're talking about with the given character. So how can they possibly appreciate the actual depth of learning them? They haven't learned them. What else do you say here? Obvious complementary picks. That's kind of ridiculous considering that there's all of the team ups. But again, these words that he's even using, it's about the pick up and play nature. It was hard for him to jump in and know which heroes did specifically what, similar to the other games, right? Like, oh, that's the sniper character, that's the shield character with simple archetypes, as well as the obvious complementary picks. So he didn't know what to pick or what should go together. And I'm telling you, having played this game a lot now and getting to the highest ranks, there is a ton of this. This is why Overwatch fans and content creators want to switch to this game, because it has so much strategy, way more strategy than the more obvious, clear, simple, easily readable games that he must be referring to. And I don't know why he wouldn't assume that it would be one or the other. How could you possibly have all of that complexity, but it not add more strategy? How could you consider yourself a gamer or someone who wants to play these types of games if you don't dig into this and start to realize how much more deep it gets over time? Anybody who really understands Overwatch or hero shooters in general that I've noticed, I've tried to look for this, they admit that Marvel Rivals gets deeper over time. All right, let's see what else he has to say. He's gonna trash one of my favorite heroes, Hulk, now. Let's see what he has here. Compounding this in a similar lack of visual clarity and identity to the hero's abilities. Take Hulk, for example. Hulk has 2 ranged abilities, which feel inherently wrong. He's the guy who smashes stuff with his fists. It's his catchphrase. But that's another separate point I'll get into. The point here is that these 2 ranged abilities, amidst the chaos of Marvel Rivals' frantic, incredibly fast-paced battles, look and feel almost identical. One is a kind of sonic boom Hulk that he makes from clapping his hands together, dealing a chunk of damage to those it hits. Another is a kind of gamma blast that stuns the enemy it hits until you punch them again. These are functionally completely different, but the lack of truly emphatic, distinguishedly visual, animative, and audio design to them means they can quite literally get lost in the noise. Now, here's the thing. I kind of empathize with this point of view because I did feel that the game felt samey in my very first video reviewing Marvel Rivals comparing to Overwatch. So I understand what it feels like to go from Blizzard design, where everything has to feel particularly unique down to every aspect of its feeling, to then go to Marvel Rivals, where there's more overlap and repetition of similar abilities. With more playtime, I can safely say that I don't really miss that dedication to unique visual clarity. Like, it just doesn't add as much as you think. And as far as Hulk goes, this allows him to be one of the most skill-expressive tanks in any of the hero shooters I've ever played. So much so that he gets banned in the top few percentage a lot of the time, despite him not necessarily being one of the top picks. I mean, he's up there, but I don't think he's the tippy top of the mountain. People just hate playing against Hulk because just of how skillful he is when you maximize his kit. And there's certainly a lot of punching with his fists, so I kind of don't understand this. I think as well, if you compared to other competitive games, the rule set of what a character doesn't always adhere to the Blizzard Overwatch philosophy. Theirs has merit, but if you play other MOBA games, for sure, you would give some of the best MOBA games of all time a bad review based on this metric. It's just kind of a silly thing to care about, especially when the players of these games care so much more about the gameplay and skill expression. And maybe, in fact, even high-level players think Hulk has too much of that, but it makes me love how he plays personally. He goes on, the problem again is that there is too few of these really clear, decisive moments when it might work. The battle is constant. No moments of ebb and flow. None! No waiting to pounce. No respite. All right, that's just clearly not true. Like, as you start to learn the game, you watch a player play Wolverine. There's a lot of waiting to pounce. It's just you are at a bad MMR and don't know how to play the game yet. These things certainly exist in the game, especially when you start to realize just how crucial map control is and how many flank paths and how the destructible environments help that. The more you master the kits, the variety of playstyles, and the maps, none of this is true. However, what is true is maybe this next bit. He says, crucially, I reckon, no choke points. Gosh, how I miss a good choke point here in Marvel Rivals. My mind keeps darting to that big, horrible wall in the first Overwatch's Hanamura. For much of the game, the attacking team would throw themselves at this choke point, crashing against it, testing for weaknesses in the enemy defense, until eventually something broke and they flooded through. Choke points, along with being incredibly satisfying to defend, are also a test of your team's real ability to understand and play the game well. How hard can you concentrate? How well can you coordinate and stay organized with this group of strangers? How well do you know the map, its flanking routes and intricacies, and the ways they combine with certain characters? How well can you time and aim your ultimate? In what must be a 50+ games of Marvel Rivals, I've yet to find a single moment that gets close to this. That gets close to the gameplay excellence of the Hanamura choke, a map that they deleted because it was so bad. What the hell are you talking about, bro? Are we really going on a paragraph on the gameplay complexities of holding for Grav Dragon at the choke of Hanamura? Listen, I liked Assault. I certainly understood the benefits of the big team play moments of coordinating to get through a choke, but they deleted that game mode from existence for a reason. People hated that. I was in the minority of people who actually appreciated and wanted to play the mode. Most players didn't, and probably would have banned it if they had the opportunity to never play it in ranked. So what the hell are you talking about? Also, Overwatch 1 doesn't exist. So you're praising a thing in a game that was supposed to be a live service that Blizzard deleted. And besides, this just isn't even true. Because if we talk about how like the Punisher slows down the game and makes for these tactical moments, you have to break through very difficult defenses at certain power points of the map in this game as well. Making sure you coordinate your ultimates. Like, what are you even talking about? It's just not even true. It's just better in these maps where there's more opportunity to move. The maps are destructible, so you have more flanking paths, more map knowledge. Now, I did speak on a podcast recently talking about Overwatch versus Marvel Rivals, and a former Overwatch League coach, Spilo, whose opinion I respect a lot more than this guy, did say that Overwatch has much more strategy when it comes to like the map control, but I think even he might change his mind as the maps really start to develop over time with Marvels. I don't know if I agree that it's just certain that the game that's been out a decade and developed and understood how to play so much more and longer, that it just inherently has more strategy just because of map control and map design. The map design in Overwatch 2 is very good. We'll give them that. But I don't think Marvel is like slight years behind them. And this guy's comparing to Hanamura, so we're not even talking about that. Like, it's a whole, this is just the worst possible argument you could make. Overwatch 2 maps are good. Hanamura, I liked playing, but most people did not like getting stuck at the choke of Hanamura until you press Q. What a ridiculous point of view. All right, he goes on, too many things. And aside from just feeling very strong, it blurs the lines unnecessarily between classes, smearing together too many archetypes. It's also not just Jeff, because he went on here to complain about how Jeff can do everything and spit you off the map. It's a clear design philosophy across the roster. Supports can do nuke damage with ultimates, carries can become almost invulnerable, tanks can regularly dish and pick people off at range, coupled with the fact that there is just too many heroes at launch, several dozen, some of which are present in every game and some that are almost never ever seen, each of whom has multiple layers of extraneous abilities, passives, and dedicated resources stacking on top of each other, and the combat itself. Another casualty of strangely lightweight animation and sound, seems weirdly flimsy and rudimental, and the battles themselves just turn to a kind of relentless swirling cell-shaded soup. This is a logically incoherent paragraph. Just because you don't get it doesn't mean the players that would can. I could say the same thing if I spent a few hours playing League of Legends and I haven't played it before. Wow, these characters have so many abilities and there's just cell-shaded graphics splashing across my screen. What's going on? This game's a 2 out of 10. Who the hell is writing these things? How was it possible to publish words this stupid? Because remember, his first premise was that the game lacks strategy. How could you not possibly know that all of that overkit and crazy over-the-top abilities, which he's correct in pointing out, would lead to incredible strategy? It isn't just random because there's so many things to learn. It's deep and nuanced and rewarding, where things aren't a simple character class that you recognize from another game. Why do you think so many people like this game? It's because it isn't so easily identifiable to be the archetypes we've played before. Why would gamers want to play a new version of the same thing they played before? And you guys, the journalists, need to have a meeting across each other and start talking to one another. Because on one hand, people say it's just an Overwatch clone, and then it gets criticized on the other end, saying that it's overly complicated and way too far from the archetypes we know and love. Who the hell is playing Overwatch right now? How dare you? praise the design of Overwatch like it's the only option for any game. Yet it's clearly unpopular and getting murdered by Marvel rivals right now. We shouldn't be talking about how Overwatch did everything right years ago. We should be learning from the success of Marvel rivals and how could Overwatch compete. Those are the conversations I want to be having in the next coming weeks, because I don't necessarily want to abandon Overwatch, but considering, as I've said in my Overwatch is Cooked video, that Marvel commits to the hero identity and bombastic gameplay that I always wanted, rather than watering down the experience just for the sake of balance or readability, I can't help but be way more interested in this game now. And a big reason why I personally feel that Overwatch failed to gain any momentum that lasted ever is because they bent over backwards to listen to very stupid opinions and form the game to try to avoid criticism, which was a development strategy playing to lose rather than what Marvel Rivals does, which is play to win. If you don't get it, that's your problem, because the players that keep coming back to keep playing this game that you're saying is just a bunch of random nonsense on screen, they get it. You don't. And it's exactly the advice that this crowd of people is trying to give Blizzard, which makes Overwatch struggle to compete, is the same reason why Concord failed, which came out with 16 heroes at launch. Was it helpful for Concord to have very clear archetypes and a smaller roster we all could easily understand? No, everyone was bored. What are you talking about? These are not good things. This review, the 40 out of 10, was just filled with nonsense. So we're gonna keep going. Unfortunately, the issues don't end there. Marvel Rivals' writing, performances, and general characterization are sadly quite poor. Each character has just a couple of lines of dialogue blurted in near unison at the start of each round and almost always bland. There are also preset interactions such as Punisher and Luna Snow, the former asking what she is, the latter responding flatly, a famous pop singer. To which Punisher replies, "I don't listen to music, I punish criminals." This would be wonderfully funny if it was in any way intentional, but the absolute deadpan blandness of the delivery strongly suggests otherwise. Another involving Luna Snow and her mentioning Magic's flaming sword and worrying about it melting her, to which Magic bluntly replies, "It's not actual fire, it's soul fire." Sheesh, talk about a conversation killer, Magic. For a game based on comics, it's deeply depressing to not find a single good pun or one-liner in sight. To this end, I think it's something that they could improve over time, certainly, don't you think? Because it's just voice line, voice acting, voice writing. So even if this were true, but I think there is quite a few that I like anyway. I think the voice acting of Iron Man is legit. Again, I'm not a big Marvel fan, but he seems exactly like Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark in persona and vibe. I think Overwatch 2 in the voice acting department distinctly put a lot of work in that and did do a good job. So this is an area they could improve over time, I'm sure. But I don't think it's like a huge fail, like he's making it seem. Frankly, I could go on. The explainer pages for heroes' abilities are poorly written, often missing key bits of information on how to actually implement an ability in the proper way. Battles themselves are too often painfully one-sided, one team getting absolutely pasted over and over, while there's no surrender function to let you, they did actually add that, to resign in those cases without punishment for leaving early. The walk back from each death is too long and boring, and deaths in this game are plentiful. I've had matches of upwards of 40 kills. They're not kills, they're eliminations, or where teammates have had more than 20 deaths. It's patently derivative in places. Far from a crime in itself, this genre in particular is built on borrowed ideas, but all of its borrowed ideas here land just slightly less successfully than their originals. Is there a hero shooter where there isn't painfully one-sided teams getting rolled? Like, there's a hierarchy of heroes, some heroes counter each other, and there's an inherent win more mechanic for when you win, you gain an ultimate, which sets the tempo of the next fight. Like, hero shooters are going to be one-sided. Often happens. I can't believe he's even saying this when he's looking back to Overwatch's Hanamura, a mode where you might not even get past the choke point for 4 minutes. Is that not one-sided to you? Part of the appeal of the Assault game mode is that it was so one-sided. It was very hard to break past the choke. You said that's a good thing. So why is it a bad thing here? That doesn't make sense. I think maybe what he means is like, because ultimates especially are so powerful, once you start to gain an advantage in Marvel Rivals, you really clean up the enemy team. Swinging fights is definitely tricky without your own huge ultimate. But I think also it harkens back to early Overwatch 1 where we saw a Genji blade get 6 kills, which hasn't happened in years because they try to balance the game down so much. Whereas Bucky has resets on his ultimate, so that's like a direct comparison, right? But just in general, lots of the ultimates can like wipe the whole team when used well. And I think that's actually crucial to the big playmaking and fun factor of the game. You feel like at any moment that you can make a big explosion happen just based on how you play your hero. What's crazy is that we're not really talking about a lack of carry potential in this game, which in Overwatch 1 certainly was a major problem. You felt like you had to walk everybody through the choke perfectly, and this guy's talking like that's the greatest invention ever. Remember how great it was to make sure everybody was holding hands perfectly so you could get through a choke to have even a chance to play the game? That was terrible. They so bad that they like reinvented the whole game to try to not have that happen ever again. No, the playability of that was terrible, whereas in Marvel Rivals, some of that can still happen in terms of them kind of beating you down and you struggling to get in. But if you learn how the maps and the heroes work, you can get into position and make massive plays in this game. And I think that's why people like it so much. It's crazy that he says that the walk back from spawn is too boring, whereas otherwise reviews say that the battling is constant and brainless. I don't know, like some characters get across the map in half a second. So I can't even say I agree with the walk back time. And I play Magneto, by the way, who has no mobility. I don't know. He closes here. I'll leave it at that. I should emphasize one last time that I don't really mind Marvel Rivals. I like the invention of special character team-ups, which feels perfectly Marvel in itself. I like the enduring sense of competition it inspires. I just don't truly like much else. The end result is a game that above all makes the success of its own rivals much more clear to me. The success? Which one? Where are they succeeding? They're dominating the market. What multiplayer game is succeeding compared to this? Much less in the genre itself. Suddenly, the lectures I sat through at Riot Games HQ on sightlines, color palettes, box heights, and map lanes during the preview for Valorant back in the day ring especially true. And Blizzard's purity of thought, its crystal clear characterization, Widowmaker and Soldier 76, for example, strangely feel more perfect Assassin and the guy with the gun archetypes than Black Widow or Punisher ever could. Its broader brushstrokes and smaller roster stand out all the clearer. Making a successful hero-based team battler, as we've seen time and time again, is just very difficult work. Making a truly brilliant one is perhaps even harder. Listen, Valorant's a good game, but we should not even begin to compare it to the tactical FPS Valorant, okay? So just get that comparison way off to the side, because that's a CSGO-like first, and hero shooter second. Now, comparing to Overwatch is a lot more clear for like 100 reasons. And it's funny because players of Overwatch hate Widowmaker and were bored by Soldier. These are two characters that Blizzard has never been able to properly balance because Widow has dominated high-level play and maybe even lots of areas of play over time. And Soldier is a balancing nightmare because he has too basic of a kit. So he can often be kind of useless if he's understated, and maybe too easy and free when he's overstated. Now, by the way, guys, in Season 1, I think Black Widow is performing a lot better, but she has a more complicated and nuanced kit, and isn't as all in on the long-ranged headshots. She has other mobility plays to make. And Punisher, because he isn't just Bastion or Soldier with a clear archetype, he's a mix of all of them, you have a lot of options. Punisher is a very interesting character in Marvel Rivals. He is not the Soldier 76 Call of Duty guy. Like whether you should use your zipline just for a get back to spawn option, can you flank, can you set up on high ground, can you use it for mobility, there's a bunch of escape tech you can do, because he has a smoke nade that launches him back and then he can hop on his own zipline to avoid dives. Is it more efficient to use his rifle or his turret? His team up with Rocket, add some options there. Really strong for infinite ammo shotgunning. If anything, he's kind of overkitted and overpowered in some cases, but because there's so many other things that are even more overkitted or overpowered, I don't think people often complain about Punisher. But as far as like an interesting strategy-based character, he's as strategy promoting as you could possibly imagine a Soldier or Bastion type archetype to be. In comparison, metas in Overwatch, where Soldier or Bastion were mainstays in, were kind of terrible. whereas the tactics and rules of engagement with and against a Punisher are far more interesting in my opinion. Okay guys, it's been a very long video. I hope you did enjoy it. I don't want to dance on the grave of Overwatch. That's not my goal, but we certainly should not be hailing it as the peak hero shooter design when it's had a very unhappy player base for many, many years now. We should instead be looking to the things that work and why and learning from them rather than glazing the ideas that clearly failed. I'll be very excited to read through the comments on this one. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like and don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch, as we're titled for now. I'll see you guys next time.